Our next question comes from Travis Brown of KBTX.
Hi, Hunter. Yeah, curious. I know A&M had a come-from-behind win this week. Indiana had a come-from-behind win 2 weeks ago. Just was there conversations on both those games, how they were maybe similar and different, and how much maybe those two games factored into the discussion between A&M and Indiana?
I will tell you, the committee in evaluating the first half of A&M's game versus South Carolina didn't look very much like a number 3 team falling behind 30-3 and having 4 turnovers in that game. But then in the second half, they looked everything like a number 3 team in the country, dominating the second half with outscoring South Carolina 28-0, outgaining them 371 yards to 76 yards, holding South Carolina to 11 yards of total offense in the fourth quarter. I mean, what the committee saw in both Indiana and Texas A&M, good teams find ways to win games when they don't play their best, and that's what Indiana and Texas A&M both did. Indiana on the road at Penn State and Texas A&M at home this past weekend against South Carolina.
Thanks.
Next, we have Eddie Pels from the Associated Press.
I was going to ask about maybe if you could talk a little bit more about Texas A&M. I mean, does that first half have the potential to come back and haunt them, or would that be just neutralized by the way they played in the third and fourth quarter?
Yeah, Eddie, from a committee standpoint, I think the second half definitively neutralized the way they played in the first half, especially when you find a way to win a game like that when you are not very good and you're not your typical self in that first half. But then how they dominated, literally dominated the second half. Again, 370-plus total yards to 76, allowing 11 total yards in the fourth quarter. Really coming back with those 28 points and taking control of that game. They looked like a top 3 team in the second half of that game. And so I think it really just balances itself out. And of course, the win helps and it keeps them undefeated at 10-0.
Our next question comes from Nicholas Colazzo of Sporting News.
Hey, what would for the top 4 teams, what would a loss in a conference championship do to kind of affect their status as with a first-round bye, without a first-round bye? Where does the committee kind of stand on that?
Yeah. We will just use the conference championship games as another data point to use in ranking our teams, and so it's hard to say if it will move a team up or down until we really have that data point and are able to compare that against other teams that play that weekend in conference championship games. And so it just becomes that 13th data point for those teams participating in their conference championship games.
So interesting stuff from Hunter Yurachek there. And for anyone joining us on our Facebook Live, feel free to jump in the comments, kind of your thoughts on the rankings and maybe what Hunter Yurachek had to say, and we can kind of discuss those, or if you have any questions. So kind of Yurachek's thoughts, like you said, a little different than Mack Rhodes, but he did say that South Carolina game just kind of net neutral. That first half team that A&M fielded did not look like a number 3 ranked team. The second half very much did in complete dominant fashion. So I guess if you take both halves and they kind of neutralize themselves, and 10-0, hard to put them anywhere else besides 3 where they were before.
Yeah, exactly, and it's no. When you talk about defense, of course, he didn't bring up the defensive aspect of this. That has been the talking point in weeks previous. But when you talk about defense, A&M's defense, thanks in part to some big offensive miscues, they allowed a very bad South Carolina offense to score 30 points. In the first half against them. That's not necessarily a good way to present to the committee that defense has necessarily improved. I think the one point to throw out here, and I talked about this a little bit last week, and I'm curious to kind of your thoughts on some of this as well. But we're going to nitpick and talk and break apart Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, why they're ranked the ways that they are. But I think the most important thing, especially from an A&M's fans perspective, if you're 1, 2, or 3, you get your bye, you get into the quarterfinals. It kind of doesn't really matter. I think the biggest thing for A&M fans, and probably for us because we would enjoy it too, is if A&M can get that number 2 spot, they're probably going to the Cotton Bowl. Right. And we love a good Cotton Bowl appearance. So, but beyond that, I don't know if it matters. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it does. The interesting thing now, getting to that 2 spot might be interesting. I think what that takes is winning an SEC title, because I think at this point, we're bringing them up right there: Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Georgia, Texas Tech. That's what's interesting to me. Texas Tech now at 5 of what's going to happen. And Juracek kind of touched on what does a conference championship game, that 13th data point, what does that mean in the committee's eyes? I think A&M is locked at 3 until that final week. Assuming they win out, assuming these top 3 teams win out, their order's going to remain going into that conference championship weekend, and there it'll be interesting. Will they go winner of the Big Ten number 1, winner of the SEC number 2, followed by the 2 runner-ups?
Mm-hmm.
Does Texas Tech winning out and winning the Big 12 vault them into a number 3 spot ahead of a loser of a conference championship game? I don't know how the committee's going to take that.
Well, and to their point, when talking about the 13th data point, if you have 4 teams in the top that have a 13th data point, and Texas Tech goes to the Big 12 title game and wins it, that is another team that has a 13th data point. They can maybe compare the Big 12 winner to the SEC and Big 10 losers and see, if both the loser of the SEC title game and the Big 10 title game lose, by a field goal at the end of the game, I think it might be hard to put Texas Tech over those schools. But if one of the if one of the teams gets absolutely blown out, well, then maybe Tech is deserving.
Yeah. I think that'll be interesting to see. I think it matters kind of the manner in which the SEC and Big Ten teams win or lose their championship games. Because again, like you said, if it's a close game, I think you kind of rank all 4 of those 1 through 4. But Texas Tech right there at 5 is going to make things interesting, as will the 3rd SEC team that doesn't even make the conference championship game, because outside of the Big Ten, the SEC, maybe the Big 12. I mean, the ACC right now is the outside looking in. They're going to get an automatic qualifier, but that might be their only team they get in. So you're looking at multiple. Right now, there are 5 SEC teams that would be in the 12-team playoff. So that'll be interesting how that shakes out in the final weekend.
Let's look at some of the movers from this week, too, because I think it's interesting. I thought, Alabama loses to Oklahoma. I thought 2-loss Alabama with they had like 4 straight wins against ranked teams in the middle of the year. I thought that would be enough to keep them over a 2-loss Notre Dame. But Notre Dame at 2 losses, those, of course, being Miami, who sits there at number 13, and A&M, who's at number 3, stays ahead of Alabama mostly because of Alabama's loss to Florida State early. That dropped them behind. Texas, with their loss to Georgia, falls all the way to number 17, and that affects A&M because that game loses a little bit of luster at the end of the season.
Right. There wasn't, a couple of weeks ago, I thought that A&M had a real shot at moving up into that 1 or 2 spot following, let's say, a win in Austin. Now I don't think it holds that much weight, and I don't think Texas has a way to play their way into the college football playoff at this point. They just seem like they are too far on the outside looking in. Even in Alabama, who right now would have the final at-large bid spot, they're in a little trouble too of getting into this, depending on how the last few weeks shake out. I think it's going to be Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M locked into those 1, 2, 3, assuming they all win out heading into the conference championship. Now, what would a potential loss in Austin look like? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
At this point.
I think a loss in Austin would definitely knock them back out of the top 4 and into the hosting the first round range. Probably, maybe that would be a Texas Tech and an A&M flip-flop, where Tech moves in and A&M drops out and plays that 12 seed. I don't know if being in that 5 seed is necessarily all that bad of a deal. You get a home game, and then you get to advance in and play the lowest ranked, team with a bye. Yeah. So I don't necessarily know what whether that changes things. Curious looking at the bracket here. If today was the end, which we know it is not, but that 11-6 matchup that A&M has been kind of tied with the entire way, Miami and Ole Miss, I think most A&M fans would be pretty okay with either of those matchups in what probably would be the Sugar Bowl in this scenario.
It's funny, looking at this might be one of the more favorable sides of the bracket that, again, this isn't going to be how it is at the end. But if it was, this would be kind of one of the more favorable situations for A&M. I would not want them having to play the winner of Alabama-Oregon or sitting up, even Oklahoma-Notre Dame having another crack at A&M. It's funny, I think that the two most favorable right now, to me, just kind of looking at it, would be that 3 and the 4, if you're looking at the bye. So, again, I think a lot of it's going to have to do with matchups and kind of how they end up. But, yeah, that playing an 11-6 seed, especially because that 11 seed is going to be someone ranked outside of the top 12, just because it's going to be someone that has an automatic bid vaulting in there, just like the 12 seed. Could be a very, very favorable spot for the Aggies.
Let's look real quick here to something we've talked about each week. This is the way that it pans out for the top 3 for the rest of the season. A&M has arguably the toughest games still left on this slate, going to number 17 Texas, although Ohio State going to the Big House. They have had trouble there. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, you could probably flip a coin on either one of those, but Indiana, they've already played 11 games. They just have a 2-9 Purdue left. You got to think they're pretty locked in to where they are. Ohio State takes on a 5-5 Rutgers. A&M a 1-10 FCS Sanford. I think.
So what you're saying is Indiana and A&M have byes this week.
Basically, yes, and you could maybe argue Ohio State does as well. This is going to be a little bit of a yawner when it comes to, I think, the ramifications for the college football play at the top of the college football playoff. Right. But Michigan and Texas there at the end. And the interesting piece to this is A&M, if they go to Austin and are able to beat Texas, they will have knowledge of their situation before the game is even played.
Right. Because of that. So let's say Ohio State. I said I don't think A&M moves. Even with the win at Texas, but let's say Ohio State loses at the Big House. Then absolutely. I would think the committee, just the way they've compared Indiana and A&M this whole time, I don't know if a win in Austin is enough to vault A&M to number 1, but I think, let's say Ohio State loses, that probably pushes Indiana to number 1, Texas A&M to number 2, with Ohio State falling out a little bit.
Just recapping a little bit of some of the conversations that have happened with this committee previously. A&M has the better strength of resume, according to ESPN. They're number 1, Indiana's number 2, Ohio State's number 3. They have the better strength of schedule of the 3 teams, which is an interesting, curious thing because they would also be last in all the SEC tiebreakers based on their SEC schedule. That Notre Dame win is really bolstering this A&M strength of schedule a lot when it comes to those metrics. But it is the total defense, the scoring defense, and even some of the total offense numbers when it comes to Ohio State and Indiana. Statistically, they are the better team. Now, it's how you compare what you're able to do and the stats you're able to put up against the kind of competition that you're playing that you don't really get the exact head-to-head there, but that's kind of the argument that's going between these two teams is A&M feasibly has the better resume. Indiana, Ohio State have put forth the better performances with the resumes, with the schedule that they have.
Right. It'll be interesting to see too. Will past performances, be brought back in discussions when they're doing their final rankings in a few weeks. Again, I know that they said that this South Carolina game was a net neutral with the first half and the second half balancing out. But will members of the committee point back to a game like that, some of these close games that A&M has been in, and use that as kind of a razor-thin tiebreaker in their mind as they do their final rankings? That's going to be interesting. How much does making the SEC title game, if you're A&M, which again all they have to do is beat Texas and they're in.
And let's pause on that for a second, because I think it is important to start talking about the scenarios that A&M gets into that title game. Right. First off, yes, they are in the driver's seat. If they win against Stanford and win at Texas, they're in the title game. If they lose the Texas game, well, I guess the Stanford game doesn't count towards SEC, but if they lose at Texas, they need Alabama and Ole Miss both to lose on the final weekend of the season, so that A&M and Georgia are the only two remaining one-loss SEC teams, and that'll get them into the title game, because none of them really have head-to-head matchups per se. And so most of this will drop down to the third tiebreaker, which is the combined record of all of the SEC teams each team has played, and then ranking them. A&M is last in that category. Most of the teams that they've played are in the bottom half of the SEC standings right now. And so they basically have to win. It's a kind of a cruddy tiebreaker, because A&M has been the most dominant SEC team so far. Right. And they can't really do much with the schedule that they're given. This looked like a schedule with Florida and Missouri and LSU that was going to be challenging, but it ended up being a bunch of teams that fired their coaches. So that'll be interesting. But the fact of the matter is, like you said, A&M needs to go to Austin and win to go to the SEC title game.
Does going to an SEC title game now, win or lose? Because again, we still think that there might be a chance if they lose the SEC title game, you're still in the top four, depending on how things shake out with Texas Tech. Does that matter? How much does that matter as getting to the SEC title game in the grand scheme of – because I think we agree they're pretty much locked into the playoff right now as Aggies. But does making the title game matter?
I think it does, because you pretty much can't get one of those first-round buys without making it to the title game. Yeah. I think if they lose at Texas – I think there's a good chance that Texas Tech could jump them into that scenario. And then if they're not in the title game, you have Georgia and Alabama. If Georgia goes and wins a title game, they have an extra data point. You're probably looking at a scenario where Georgia's the 3 seed. If they win, Tech is the 4 seed. A&M is the 5 seed. So I think if you want that bye in the first round and go to a chance to go straight to the quarterfinals, I think you have to make the title game. Now, I think once you've made the title game, you're pretty much locked in to one of those top 4 seeds, but you got to make the SEC title game if you want the bye.
And I think that's something that A&M would want. Mm-hmm. Again, last year was kind of weird. The first year of the college football playoff, none of the teams that had a bye in the quarterfinal, to the quarterfinal round advanced. But I don't think that's enough for teams to not want to buy.
I think
I want extra rest at this point.
Yeah, and I think, yes, if you go, I just don't want. A&M has proven that they have gone out and been able to win multiple different ways in multiple scenarios, getting way behind against South Carolina. But I just think if you are serious about wanting to try to make a run to a national title, the less games, the better. Right. I know hosting a playoff game in Kyle would be special and electric, and there's a good chance you're probably going to get an opponent that you could beat to move on. But that's just another opportunity for players to get hurt. It's another opportunity to wear your guys down. It's another opportunity to lose. And I think, people, I heard some of the commentators on the ESPN saying, like Ole Miss, why would they want to advance and go on to the SEC title game to play that extra game? Okay, that is an extra game. But then on the flip side, you're going to get an extra game in the first round of the playoff. I don't know. I think I would rather go to the playoff, ensure yourself a bye, and have less playoff games to be able to get to the national title game.
And as we saw there could be some the way this is shaking out, some pretty favorable matchups in that quarterfinal round if you're sitting there waiting for a bye. So, if you're A&M, it's easy. Win out, and you are in pretty good position to not only make it to the quarterfinal round, but a potential run into the semifinal after that. So. This was the third edition of the college football rankings. We're going to continue to look at them, although we do kind of say I think they're kind of locked into this number 3 until something crazy happens, which I don't think will be next week.
And I think we should put out a little PSA for next week's going to be a little different. We won't have this live ranking show streaming, but we should be live on the air right after it goes on.
We do have on KBTX at KB, which you can also watch online, but it'll be live on KBTX. Is our 30-minute special. It's a playoff preview special / Texas preview special. It'll air Tuesday at 6:30. The rankings come out at 6. We're going to be live at 6:30 on TV, basically gearing up for the Lone Star Showdown, which is a week from Friday, so that Black Friday. We're going to have some exclusive interviews and just analysis and just getting up for the big game and looking beyond. Because, yes, Texas is a big game, but there are bigger games beyond that in A&M's horizon this season.
Yep. So we'll be doing a little bit different that week, but next week. But you wouldn't think much is going to change with the opponent this week.
No,
and
we'll still see how they
probably a lot of the same conversation moving into next week.
We'll see how some of the backups play.
There you go.
So.
There you go.
All righty, but until then, we will look forward to that next Tuesday at 6:30, that preview special. But thank you for watching. For Travis Brown, I'm Tyler Shaw.